Welcome to / to this episode, which is devoted to the business model canvas. As you know, / is where we connect the dots between professional projects, teaching, research, and practitioner insights from business life. So recently in one of my classes on digital innovation, we had a pretty lively discussion on how to use the business model canvas effectively. This conversation made me realize that understanding the rationale behind different ways of applying the business model canvas is just as important as knowing how to fill it out. More specifically, it reinforced why a market-anchored, customer-centric approach is the most effective way to ensure strategic alignment and business viability. Today, we're going to be diving into the business model canvas, but not just with any way of filling it out. We'll explore what I consider to be an optimized sequence that ensures consistency, avoids contradictions, and makes the financial model truly reflect business needs, market needs. By the end of this episode, I believe you will understand how to structure your business model canvas, how to fill it out, in which sequence it is best for you to proceed. And I hope to give you something that connects the strategic, the operational, the logical, making it all customer-driven. So let's get started. So why does sequence matter? In fact, people start with what is most visible to them. So often that's internal aspects related to their role. If they're engineers, they'll naturally tend to start from key activities and key resources, which is a really good place to start for people who like to deal with how things work. If they're the type of CEO who's more of a deal maker, strategist, and tactician, their preferred starting point will be key partners and main customer accounts. Whereas product marketing folks will want to start from the value proposition, which they view as the heart of the business. Their marketing and communication colleagues, their initial focus will be on channels used to connect with the market. Each of those groups will start where they are most comfortable and work out the other parts of the business model canvas in a way that is consistent with their starting point. And they might also iterate on the starting points to adjust based on other aspects of the framework. So, for instance, they'll start with channels, work out value proposition and maybe key partners, and at that point go back to channels because they realize that a given channel is actually part of the business model as a result of a relationship with a key partner. That often happens with tech partners like, the big platforms, the Salesforces, the Microsofts, and the SAPs and others, other big players in this world, where you realize that in engaging with them, you become a bit of a channel for their business, and they will become a bit of a channel for yours, and the intensity of the relationship will depend very often on how exclusive you might want to be to one another. So while these perspectives are actually valid, they often lead to biases and inconsistencies. And that's why I think that a structured approach that puts customers first is essential to building a strong and coherent business model. The approach that we're advocating for here bridges engineering, marketing, and sales by reinforcing the fundamental role of customers and buyers in any consideration. Actually, the only reason why we're opening the shop every morning is our customers. So let's get started with this. I always start with the market side. So it's the right-hand side of the business model canvas, the market segments. And I'm trying to understand, even for an existing business, not just for a startup or not just for a new value proposition. I know tons of businesses who are insufficiently knowledgeable about who their segments are or who operate on the basis of a segmentation that is not as appropriate as it should be. So I'm trying to understand who our customers are, what consistent groups they form. How can we use those groups to structure how we address their needs and actually what are these needs exactly? I usually tend to consider those as very central, pretty much as they are central to other frameworks that I use a lot, like the Wordley map, where we do want to understand the motivations and the needs of each anchor point in a Wordley map. But we'll talk about Wordley maps in a separate episode. Having done this work on the market side of things, and if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter, so long as you realize you've made a number of assumptions about your customers, and you might want to revisit those at a future moment as you review strategically the business. Then I will move to the value proposition box of the business model canvas. So what I'm trying to figure out there is exactly what should go in that box that has value for those segments that I want to target, that is addressing their needs, those needs that they have expressed, but also those needs that are latent, the needs that I have identified by talking to them, by doing the job of exploring what their reality is, exploring what their jobs to do are, understanding the pains and the things they're trying to achieve in a way that is very much observation-oriented, research-oriented, curiosity-driven, more than, judgment-driven, or more than shaped by beliefs that are not checked and not verified in real life. So we will put in the value proposition box all of the elements that tie back to customer needs, and sometimes we will even color code them so that we can map the elements of the value proposition according to the segment that they are most directly connected to. And then I know that there are different ways to consider this. Some people tend to go to channels first, but I like starting by customer relationships first, because the customer relationship is something that will define what exactly we want to achieve in establishing the relationship with those customers. Do we want to build that relationship on the basis of expertise and trust in the expertise? Do we want to base it on intimate understanding of customer knowledge? How do we want to taint it? What are the means that we will deploy? What are the characteristics we want in those relationships? And those characteristics will typically be tainted by what we want as a brand, how we've established the brand of the service we want or of the business we want to promote. Those brand values will also taint the customer relationships. So it's a really great place to go next, because now you know what your segments need, what your market needs, what your value prop is, how you're going to connect with your market, and then you can go into channels, which is the fourth box, and understand which channels you want to use in order to communicate, interact, transact, and support your market. Very often people think of channels as just being communication channels, but that's not enough, because there are interactive channels. There are channels that you will use to co-shape, if you will, what you're trying to achieve with your customers. That's interaction. And there will be channels also that you will use to transact, to sell them things. And those are typically the e-commerce platforms or the self-service portals that clients use for a fee. And then there is also the support channels. I tend to consider support channels as being completely part of marketing and completely part of the market side, if you will, of the business model canvas, the right-hand side of the business model canvas, as opposed to seeing those support channels as being operational in nature and fundamentally there to take care of all the service delivery aspects. I think they are places where you will capture understanding of what customers actually need through the things that they cannot do with your product. You will find new needs, new opportunities to shape your products. And also the best proof that customer care belongs to the market side of things is that when customer care doesn't actually perform the way it should, isn't able to support the business in the proper way, where you will see the effects is actually your communication channels, and particularly things like social media. So having done that, we now have customer segments, the value proposition, the relationships we want with the customers, and the channels defined in a pretty solid way. And then we can move to the left-hand side of the business model canvas, because the left-hand side of the business model canvas has all of the ingredients, all of the means that we need so that we can perform all the things that are on the right-hand side, so that we can deliver the promise that the value proposition is making, and we can deliver that to the customers we have in our target segments. Therefore, we are, by doing this, by starting from the right-hand side and going to the left-hand side of the business model canvas, and more particularly within the right-hand side by starting with the customer segments and only then shaping value proposition, customer relationships and channels, what we're actually doing is that we are being extremely effective at submitting, at creating a hierarchy between the goal and the means. The goal is to serve the client. The means are everything else. So the value proposition is there to serve the clients. It doesn't have any other reason for being. And therefore, if we have started with a value proposition we have included in the value proposition things that we think might be useful, things that we think we might want to push, but which have no correspondence in customer needs and in customer latent needs, then in fact what we're trying to do is stuff the market with stuff they don't need, push stuff to the market that the market doesn't need. And therefore, we need to be very strict at making sure that whatever it is that we inject into the business model serves a purpose. And what is on the left-hand side is what is justified by the needs that are on the right-hand side. And therefore, we start with the right-hand side, and then we move to the left-hand side of the business model canvas. On that part, where I like starting again is the most outward-looking piece of this left-hand side, which is key partners. Those we need to strengthen our business, understand exactly those strategic alliances and how they enhance the value for us. Understand, ensure what the mutual benefits are, how that aligns with our value proposition, what it is that we need to have in our value proposition to create enough value for those key partners to strengthen the long-term relationships. And as a result, when we look at key partners, we understand what their position is. We will run stakeholder analysis and stakeholder mapping because they are key stakeholders. That will enable us to revisit a bit our value proposition. Pretty much like when we were understanding the customer side of things, and we only then included items in our value proposition. Same way, we will understand key partner needs and expand, adjust, or include more things in our value proposition to serve those key partners. A great example of that is what Netflix does with their devices that they have to help internet service providers, the people who provide connectivity, make sure that their subscribers can access Netflix content without necessarily increasing the cost of interconnection between a given ISP and the ISP that holds the content where, that's needed by their customers. So what Netflix has done is develop something that they call the Open Connect appliances, which are actually managed by Netflix. They're like a specialized content delivery network that keeps the content that is most likely to be used by the subscribers of a given ISP so that the traffic remains within the infrastructure of that ISP. While Open Connect appliances are essentially a free service that Netflix provides to the ISPs so that the existence of Netflix is not causing the inconvenience of increased interconnect fees for those ISPs. As a result, Netflix has included in their value proposition those Open Connect appliances to cater to the needs of their key partners called ISPs. And therefore, you see why we need sometimes to go back and revisit the value proposition in order to include those items that are needed to nurture the key partnerships that we need for the business. Having taken care of the key partners, which is the fifth place where I will go on the business model canvas after customer segments, value proposition, customer relationships, and channels, I will then move on to key resources, which is what it is that we need in order to achieve success. And that includes essential assets, skills, people, capabilities, operational, and other financial means that we need. And that's where we need to be making sure that those resources are all the things that we need to serve the right-hand side of the business model canvas as defined previously, but also the key partners. And that is why I will only look at key resources after I've done the analysis of the key partners. And when we have those key resources, we need to think about how we will actually mobilize them. That's when the seventh part of the business model canvas comes in with key activities. And key activities will describe the essential operations. It will define the critical business operations that are supporting both customer needs and partnerships. And it will help us optimize processes for efficiency, differentiation, value for both our customer segments and our key partners. And then I have the entire upper part of my business model canvas, the right-hand side that is customer-facing and the left-hand side that is more all of the means that are needed to serve the market, as well as the needs of my key partners that is shaped. And when I have that, I have all the elements that I need to understand what the structure of my P&L is going to be, to understand what the revenue streams will be, where the money will come from, define direct revenues, define indirect revenues, define revenues that come from partner relationships like commissions, affiliate fees, and this kind of stuff. And I will also then do the final part of the business model canvas, which is really the operating expenses. I'll look at operating expenses so that they reflect all of the things that I have in my business model canvas, all of the key resources, all of the key activities, all of the relationships to key partners, all of the things that may be cost of channels, all of the things that I need to nurture the right relationships with the clients, all of the things that I need to make the value proposition function. And you will see how that value proposition here is really the core articulation between the right-hand side, customer-facing side of the business model canvas and the left-hand side, which are the means that I need to serve those market needs. And I will only include in the operating expenses those items that are necessary and those items that are necessary to generate the revenue, which is that a reflection of the fact that my operating expenses should be tied to some form of business value that I'm getting out of structuring the business in that way. Having done that, I have taken care of 9 boxes, so to speak, in my business model canvas, and that's not my final point. I will also need to look at a 10th element that you will not see on the business model canvas as such, which is capital employed, capital expenditure. How much capital do I put in that operation, and what return does that imply? Because I now know exactly what the business model generates in principle when I compare the revenue side with the cost side, with the operating expenses. And therefore, I can have a proper assessment for what kind of return I can expect on the capital employed. And that sequence works really, really well. And it does work well because it is customer driven, which means that everything starts with understanding what customers need, what the different segments need. It has logical flow because it allows you to connect that in a systematic way to the value proposition, to the relationships and to the channels you use, and then go to the resources that you need to make all that work, key partnerships, key resources, key activities. Then you will look at the financial translation of all that. It provides strategic consistency. It prevents contradiction between key elements while securing an exhaustive view of what your business should look like. It gives you also the ability to structure key activities and partnerships so that they are most favorable to strengthening your business. And ultimately, this sequence of filling the business model canvas will also give you the best foundation for financial realism. It ends with a fully backed financial model, with a fully backed assessment for return on capital employed, and that is probably your best way of reflecting what you expect to be your business reality. So that's the optimized way to fill out the business model canvas, starting with the customer, understanding the needs of each segment that you want to target, structuring the value proposition strategically and pragmatically, catering to the needs of customers and key partners, organizing for effective and efficient value delivery through key resources and activities, and finishing with the financial sustainability, which ensures you have like a strong, profitable business model that is enough to justify the capital that you will invest in it. And when we talk about capital, by the way, it is capital in the broadest sense possible. It is, of course, financial capital, but it is also other things. Increasingly, it's going to become natural assets that come from the environment, because these tend to be scarcer or more expensive to extract, or more expensive because of some regulations. You will need to assess intellectual capital that you need to mobilize and invest. You will need to assess the social capital, the human capital, the technological capital, all forms of capital, and then assess whether what you're building provides sufficient impact and returns, and not only financial returns, but provides the kind of impact you're looking for in what you're structuring. So I hope this will serve as good food for thought if you're a practitioner interested in making the most of this amazing framework that's called the Business Model Canvas. So whether you're an established business or a younger company, it's anyway well worth going through the BMC, to the Business Model Canvas, to describe and assess your current business model. Always start with a fresh eye, even if you're an established business, because you need to look at the world not as though you have no knowledge of your business, but by not assuming that what you know is necessarily true. If you look at it from a fresh eye, you will look again at the market, try to understand needs of groups of buyers, of customers. You will choose those that you're most interested in and capable of serving, and then you will structure your entire model as a function of that, so that you are market-driven, you're customer-centric. So the question is, how does your current business model canvas reflect your strategic priorities? What are the areas where a shift in perspective might enhance alignment and financial sustainability? These are interesting questions to explore. If you have comments or questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks for tuning in to // and see you next time.